Our presenter this evening is Bill Muehlenberg. He will speak for about 45 minutes, and then after a short break we'll have question and answer. Bill is an author, lecturer in theology, ethics, philosophy and apologetics. He's a political commentator and a blogger with over 3,300 articles, 3,300 articles posted. He's based in Melbourne. He's married to an Australian wife and he's got 3 kids, originally from the US, as you'll find out from his accent when he gets up here, so it's no surprise. But he's been in Australia for over, I think, nearly 25 years now, so he's well and truly planted himself in Australia. Bill has written several books, and he's got 2 on sale here this evening. I think there's still some left. They were selling like hotcakes. When I discussed this evening presentation with Bill, he asked me how long. I said, well, a good 45 minutes should do it. He says, oh, thank goodness. He says, I've got 5 hours of material. So it's also an indication of the importance of the topic. I mean, it's something that is, I think, important in today's society. It's becoming more topical day by day. So without any further ado, let's get our man Bill Muehlenberg up here to do our presentation for us.
All right. Thanks very much, Graham. Thank you indeed for coming out tonight. Great view of your great city. If you do get tired looking at me, feel free to scan to your left. I'd do the same, actually, if I had the chance. Actually, I was here about, 2 or 3 years ago. We had a C&I function. It was a debate on that occasion. So there you only had about 50% of me. Here, for good or ill, you have all of me for the whole night. But certainly within 45, maybe even less, we'll be done. Do some Q&A and we'll still get you home at a reasonable hour. I've been here for about a week now. I go back to Melbourne on, tomorrow afternoon. So we've had some good meetings and functions here and there. And Graham has asked me to speak on, obviously, a very important issue, that of freedom. Now, of course, that's a big one. Plenty of threats to freedom in the West today, so we could do so many different options. So I suggested to Graham maybe we could focus on kind of 2 main areas. I've been kind of involved in all these sorts of things for quite some time now, both here and back home in the US. And so after a while you begin to see what are the areas that are the flash spots, what are the areas of concern. So I've got 2 I've picked. You may well have other areas you'd rightly suggest as areas that freedom is certainly taking a hammering with of late. But I think these 2 are representative. I'm not necessarily picking on these 2, although as you heard, I've got some books in back in which I cover one of the 2. I better spill the beans straight away. I think Islam can indeed be a real threat, creeping Sharia and the like in the West. And the other is what we sometimes call the militant homosexual lobby, as opposed to, people, homosexuals, who are quite happy to do their thing, be left alone. But it's more the organized lobby group that tends to, as we'll see, demand things that may well impact on your own liberties and freedoms. So those are the 2, and some of the books I have concerned with the homosexual issue. I'm hoping maybe by next year this time we'll have some books out on Islam. Of course, there's plenty of good material on both of these topics. My own website features a fair amount of articles. My next book, I might as well spill the beans even more, hopefully out in November, will be on abortion. So I'm picking all the hot potato issues. So if you're looking for a quiet and peaceful life, or not rocking the boat, or not being anything that will offend political correctness, you probably don't want to hang around with me, because I'm doing all those kind of things constantly. And in fact, I suppose we could offer that as a warning. If you don't like political correctness or getting people easily offended, this may not be the place for you tonight. Who knows? Maybe, get a drink next door, have a good look at the view. but you're hopefully here because you are concerned about freedom. Freedom and democracy are hugely important. A lot of blood has been spilled for them, and as we see them slowly being whittled away, well, it should concern all of us. So that's what we're going to do, 35, 40 minutes, cover these two areas. And if you're not convinced at this point, hopefully in half hour's time you will be, there's a major threat to a lot of the things you and I hold near and dear. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, even sometimes freedom of assembly, freedom of conscience. All of these are really under attack. You'll see soon even freedom of assembly, times where you have to run the gauntlet, even in meetings like this here in Australia. So there's plenty of examples. In fact, either one of these we could have filled the hour. In fact, my newest book has got 200 examples of how freedom is at risk in this area. So there's a lot going on here. As we say, from my point of view, you would have other thoughts perhaps. Islam, freedom, go to hell, hopefully not representative obviously of all Muslims, but sadly enough Muslims in the West that it should be something we ought to be a bit concerned about. And the same with freedom of speech with the other area. So we're going to look at both in turn, and in both we'll do some overseas examples, let you know what's happening around the world, and then we'll finish up with some Australian examples. In fact, bringing it right up to date, right up to this week. So we'll begin with Islam. In the ideal world, we'd spend a bit of time explaining more about Islam. What it means, what it's all about. So again, let me preface all this, just like I said a moment ago about there's the lobby group and those who want to be left alone. You could say in many respects the same would be true here. Plenty of Muslims happy to live in Australia, embrace Australian values, love being here, have no idea of chopping off your head or imposing Sharia law. But sadly, there are some, and in some ways many, who do feel that way. So once again, it's distinguishing perhaps the more radical elements between hopefully what is the majority in the West and in Australia. So we'll begin with Islam, what we call creeping Sharia or stealth jihad. There's actually tons of it. I mean, every day we see headlines about it. So I'm just going to give you a few samples going back a few years, bring it right up to date. So let's just look at overseas examples, beginning with the UK. Here we have schoolboys, just at, secular schools, being threatened with detention if they don't bow down as an exercise in, interfaith dialogue or getting to know about world religions by refusing to bow and pray to Allah. Students there, way back in 2008, were being threatened with detention. The UN, this has been an ongoing push in the UN, the idea of criminalizing Islam or criticism of Islam. So there is a UN resolution which has been debated often, and this is going back, as you can see, to 2009, but it keeps rearing its rather ugly head. England again, here's a Christian hotel owner being dragged to courts simply because they had a Muslim guest in their hotel. They had a discussion about Islam. The Muslim didn't like their point of view, and for that, this couple is being dragged to the courts, or was back in 2009. Now, a bunch of these examples will be Christian, but anybody concerned about creeping Sharia, or as we'll see later, some of the clashes to religious and other types of liberty, well, it's not just those who may be Christians who are feeling the impact of these kind of things. As you probably know, at this point there are a number of no-go zones in good hunks of England. I was there last year. Big corridor through the middle and the north where large Muslim population, and often getting a bit risky for those who don't embrace Sharia law. As you can even see, here's obviously an English convert to Islam, posting his Sharia-controlled sticker, public streets, saying this is now a part of our agenda. You fit in or get out. That's kind of scary to have in the streets of major English cities. Another one from the UK. Here was a Christian worker who, again, faced a lawsuit. What she says is being targeted by Muslims because of some of the concerns that she had and shared in her own workplace. In UK again, quite a few of these come from England. A girl of 5, the youngest into a forced marriage, happening way too often in the UK, as we'll see, actually happening here as well. Up to 400 children in the past year forced into these kind of Islamic marriages. Now, of course, if you know anything about Muhammad and his example, he had about 13 wives all up, but Aisha, of course, was the youngest, married very early on and consummated just a few years later. In today's books, we would call that, it'd be illegal, but Muhammad is the perfect example. So what he did in word and deed becomes the precedent for all good Muslims. They're meant to follow his example. So multiple wives, child brides, and so on. That's a good Muslim is simply following the example of Muhammad. Norway. Here was a gal, TV anchor woman, discharged for wearing a cross, found to upset the local Muslim community. So simply for having that, her own expression of faith, she lost her job. Back to the UK, here children, again, a field trip, as we used to say in America. They were supposed to go to a mosque, learn about Islam. One parent, at least, said we'd prefer not to. We'd rather let our kids skip this, if you don't mind, and they were branded as being racist and so on for simply not wanting to get involved in that. In America, Brandeis University, some of you might know of Ayaan Hirsi Ali, who's was, of course, from a Muslim country in Africa, has really renounced Islam altogether. In fact, is now a fairly vocal atheist, but now she's written a number of books and speaks out on what she sees as not only the misogynist and the anti-women nature of Islam, but all the oppression that takes place. She was meant to have gotten an honorary degree at Brandeis, but again, pressure from Muslims meant that she did not get that. Saudi Arabia has called for criticism of religion to be outlawed in Norway. So Scandinavia, we've already looked at examples there, saying once again, we can do nothing to insult the Prophet, so criticism of religion must be strictly curtailed. Brunei, another country, phasing in Sharia law, including, as you can see, amputations, flogging, stoning, and so on. So we've got about 5-6 countries now in the Muslim majority world that has full Sharia law, or is certainly moving more in that direction. Northern Ireland. Here was a pastor who was speaking out about Islam. He used some pretty forceful descriptions in his own church. And now, simply to say in your own church what you think of, well, in this case, Islam, he's being investigated by the police. So no guarantee, simply speaking from your own pulpit in your own church, that you won't have the police knocking on your door. Denver, Colorado, this is in the U.S., of course. A Christian policeman who did not want to be forced to attend a mosque took his court case to a federal level, and well, unfortunately he lost that case. He said, no, you have to do it whether you like it or not. whether your Christian convictions tell you otherwise, you must do this as part of your work, at least in Denver. Back in London, I don't know if we have any dog lovers here, but there are places where, well, it's not actually safe in the UK. Dogs, of course, are considered unclean in Islam. So you even have posters like this, where, you know, don't walk your dog here. Do so at your own risk. Where are we at? England again. Schools banning books